Hello, City of Canby, and thank you for joining us for this Canby Planning Commission on Monday, October 23rd. We'd like to get started with our Pledge of Allegiance. Please join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Okay, consent items. We have none. Moving on to citizen input on non-agenda items. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the Planning Commission on non-agenda items. Each person will be given 3 minutes to speak. Staff and Planning Commission will make every effort to respond to the questions raised during citizens input before the meeting ends or as quickly as possible thereafter. You may speak on non-agenda items via Zoom at the provided Zoom link, or you may email public comments at cambyoregon.gov no later than 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting, and provide your name, the topic you would like to speak on, and your phone number. Do we have any citizen input on non-agenda items, either via the interwebs or in person? No? None. Okay, moving on to new business. None. So that takes us right over into public hearings. And let's see, where's my script for that? Okay. Public hearings. Tonight, there's a matter before the hearing body that requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matters. If you wish to testify on these matters, please fill out a public testimony card and give it to the recording secretary. When your name is called, please step forward to the microphone at the front table, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In doing so, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. All questions must be directed through the chair, that's me. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access. All written testimony received both for and against shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. Staff will present for 5 minutes. Questions, if any, by the hearing body or staff. Chair will open the public hearing for testimony. The applicants will have 20 minutes. The proponents will have 3 minutes. The opponents have 3 minutes, and any rebuttal, 10 minutes. Chair will close the public hearing. Then we'll open questions by the hearing body and discussion by the hearing body. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing on each matter, or it will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure of the public hearings? Seeing no questions, we will turn it over to Emma, to our associate planner, to present.
Yes. Hello, good evening, commissioners. Tonight, I am here to present to you a brief overview of the Public Works Fueling Facility, which is a design review application and a conditional use permit application. The project is to create a card lock fueling facility at the Public Works Operations Center. So this is a gas station in a sense that would be closed to the public and would be exclusively available to City of Canby departments and City of Canby partners as well. So a brief overview of the site. The site is located at the existing Public Works Operations Center, which is located at 1470 Northeast Territorial. It is located directly north of the intersection of Territorial and Redwood. It is located approximately 1,600 feet north of that intersection, so it's a fair ways north of the access to the site. It is a fairly large tax lot that the tax lot also has Eco Park included in the tax lot, as you can see outlined here on this blue on the map. The area of improvements are kind of covered by Judy's head at the moment, but up in the top right corner, sorry, Judy, is a red area there, and it's basically just across the street from the Public Works office, if you have ever made it to the site. There we go. That area in red up there is the area of improvements that we're discussing for tonight, and that area is approximately 53,000 square feet. As I mentioned, it is a site and design review because there are new structures being proposed on the site, so that triggers that application. And the use is a conditional use in the zone, and I'll get into that more in a minute. So the zoning for the site is actually fairly unique. Given the use of the site, it is actually zoned R1 low-density residential. As some of you may know, we don't currently have a public facilities, pseudo-public zone in the city, so there's not necessarily a more appropriate zone at the moment, but the zoning certainly doesn't fit the use that is there right now. In the R1 zone, a major public facility, which we would consider this, is it's a facility that's serving a public use, and it is considered a conditional use in the zone, hence the CUP application. And I also included the comprehensive plan map here because this paints a little bit of a better picture of what's going on for the uses at the site and both around the site. So as you see outlined in red, that is the site. The site is designated P public land use designation in the comprehensive plan. To the south, you see Eco Park, which is a park. You see the Willamette Country Club to the west and some undesignated outside city limits land to the east, and a little bit of high-density residential to the south of the site. So getting into the project is proposed to be completed in 2 phases. The first phase would be the fueling facility. So as I mentioned, this is the cardlock fuel station, and we'll also have a canopy with the fueling area. The fuel station is exclusively limited for use by Public Works, Canby Area Transit, Police, Fire, and Canby Utility. Public use of the station will not be permitted. In addition to the fueling area, there will be separately 3 storage fuel tanks on the site that will be added as part of this project. And the second piece is parking improvements. So they're proposed to formalize the existing parking area at the site and add some parking elements, which I will show you here. So this is the site plan for the project. And so you can see here, phase 1 is both in the south. Oh, sorry, this is actually facing north. So on the east edge of the site, that darker shaded area is new pavement that will be added to extend the paved area that's existing, a new paved area out to that fuel area, station area. And then you can also see directly north of the Public Works office is the 3 storage tanks that are proposed. And then for phase 2, this is the upgraded parking area that's proposed. So the new currently the parking area is not paved and unstriped entirely, so this would be a big upgrade from that. It would be adding 34 parking spaces to the site, or striping for those 34 spaces. It would be adding landscape islands and buffer landscaping around the parking area. It would be adding ADA spaces, and it would also be adding a pedestrian marked walkway between the parking to the office. And so for the parking area, in absence of a minimum parking standard for this specific use in our parking table in the code, staff believes the parking is sufficient because there is there is 34 spaces for currently 18 employees at site. This parking is intended to serve both visitors and employees, but they're not expected to have visitors that would outweigh that number of parking that is proposed. And so when you exclude the ADA spaces, the parking number to employee ratio is about 1.7. So we believe the parking is sufficient. So for this application, a brief overview of the applicable criteria we have here. So we're looking at parking, site development standards for the R1 zone, outdoor lighting, site and design review, CUP, and application procedures. So for the site and design review criteria, the LID and the site and design matrices were reviewed and are met with the exception that phase 1 is 1 point short. So in the staff report, you'll notice that the matrices are broken up into phases, so that phase 1 and phase 2, phase 1 is by itself, and then phase 2 is the combination of the both of them. Staff believe this is sufficient because if you look at the limited scope of the improvements, if you look at kind of what points are available to get to make up left, it doesn't really make sense for what's proposed at this site. And it will be temporary as this is the phase 1 improvements, and phase 2 does exceed the minimum requirements for this site design matrices and the LID points. The building design and use is compatible with neighboring structures. Most of the neighboring structures out there are kind of secluded to the public works, wastewater treatment, and the new fire station out there. All are, very utilitarian design, are designed for their intended use. The building will be, the canopy will be white, which is fairly similar to the coloring of the other buildings on the Public Works Operations Center site. The landscaping, the project meets both minimum landscaping for the entire site and parking. It exceeds the parking lot landscaping requirements for the buffering as well. And the bike and pedestrian facilities proposed are adequate for the site, given the site's use. There is as I mentioned, that pedestrian walkway from the parking to the building. There is bike parking proposed, and generally this is, a very low bike ped use, and it is heavily vehicle focused. And so we also have the CUP criteria as well. For the CUP criteria, first, as reviewed in the staff report, it meets all of the development code regulations, as well as applicable comp plan policies. There's two. The comp plan really focuses on the adequate provision of the full range of public facilities and services in the city. So providing this city facility would help several of our service providers within both the city and partner agencies provide that full service and improve their service. Additionally, the comp plan speaks to the compatibility of land uses in the city. When you look at the fact that this site has been used for a public works operations center, which this proposed use is just in addition to and fairly consistent with the existing use, you could make the argument that it is compatible with the surrounding uses. Neighboring residential is over 1,000 feet away, and there's fairly good buffering with Eco Park to the south, as well as the open space lot that is located to the east. The public facilities are adequate, kind of obvious in this application, but it was reviewed and approved by the public facilities providers. And the facility will not alter the character of the surrounding areas. That's pretty similar to what I said before. It is kind of consistent with what is already happening on the site and will continue to do so. Lighting, so this was one piece of the application where we did deviate from the standard slightly, in that we have two lighting zones for our outdoor lighting. We have the LZ1 and the LZ2. Typically, all residential zones are designated to the LZ1 zone. However, we considered this use and the amount of lighting that this use requires. And we felt that the LZ2 was more appropriate given the site's use, not necessarily the zoning, and the fact that the applicant was able to prove that the impacts of the lighting will be very low while meeting the LZ2. So the proposed lighting plan meets the LZ2 standards, and that also included a photometric plan, and the photometric plan shows that the lighting will emit no more than 0.1 foot candles at the property line. So a very low lighting level at the property line, which that property line is the east property line and is, once again, well over 1,000 feet from any neighboring residential uses. So based on the application submitted, the facts and findings and conclusion in the staff report, staff recommends approving DR 2304 and CUP 2302, subject to the conditions of approval. And that concludes my applications, if anyone wants to start off with questions.
I do have a question. Can you speak to the design portion that includes the oil water separator? I think I saw that was getting installed, but yet it said nothing. It said there's no plan for sanitary sewer being brought up. From our background, effluent from oil water separators typically go to sanitary sewer, so I was wondering how that was going to be addressed.
Sure, I will let the applicant speak to that, since that
Okay.
is more of a public works related standard.
Anybody else have anything?
My concern on this is the security of these tanks. Has this been looked at?
Commissioner Llewellyn, can you speak specifically to the concern?
Well, you're talking about a lot of fuel sitting in one spot next to rivers and parks. If there's a national disaster, has that been looked at? How would that be handled?
I think the applicant can speak to that as well. I would say that this is not the only review here that's going on, so there's other reviewers that look at this as well, that it's not just the city looking at that, but I think the applicant can address that.
Something I'd like to kind of piggyback on security concerns is above and beyond the environmental impact that we could have with an issue. It's very visible and open from the river, from that open lot next to it, from pedestrian paths nearby. If somebody wanted to mess with those, this is a great target for something very large and very flammable. In a lot of other instances, things like this are kind of kept under wraps, and we are putting a big marquee sign on it by having them out in the open. So I'd like to know a little bit more about why we are looking at doing it above ground rather than underground, to make it a little bit less obvious.
And did anybody see if Judy had anything she wanted to add? I can't see her anymore on the screen.
No, thank
Shaking
you.
your head no, I think.
Nothing? Okay.
Nothing, thank
I mean,
you.
if there's no other questions, I think we should just turn to the applicant. Does that sound good? Yep. Okay.
All right, I've got one other question. Just you were talking about the oil water separator and wanting to know about that. I'm not clear from reading the plan for the stormwater management why we wouldn't be seeing oil contaminated stormwater runoff going to the east and into the river as well. I'd like to just understand a little bit better what the differentiation is between any containment of stormwater, contaminated water, and the oil water separator's function and all of this.
Great. Perfect. All right. With that, we can have the applicant come on up.
Peter, that pen-looking thing is
Thank you.
I'm Peter Kappertz with Architecture Northwest. I reside in Gresham, Oregon. I've been involved with the design of fuel facilities for some 35 years and probably have been close to 400 facilities, 3 that I know of in Canby over the years, and both above ground and underground tank designs that I've worked with over the years. I want to thank Emma for her presentation. I think it's very thorough, and I believe we've adequately addressed all of the necessary criteria for design review and conditional use permit as indicated in the staff report. So I'll speak to the concerns. The oil water separator is existing.
Okay.
And it's connected to sanitary sewer. It's currently serving your recycling area.
Yeah, to the, hi, I'm Jerry Nalzine, Canby Public Works Director. We even did an extra step on this. It's gonna go into a pumping system that, with a pressure line that takes it over into our sewer recycling bays. And if you don't know what those are, it's to the, I guess it'd be the south, other end of the property. And they're it's a pipe system that's got a sand and pea gravel base that we dump our sewer in for drying out the beds. So it's gonna actually pipe into that and it's going to have to go through that medium and then through a 1,500-gallon oil water separator. And our wastewater treatment people, we work with them on this so that they're kind of in charge of this before it gets pumped to that even, so that we make sure we protect our plant.
Thank you.
So the area under the canopy goes to pollution control catch basins, which are trapped catch basins, which have about 6 inches of retention capability in terms of depth in the catch basin. That in turn will go to a pump that will send it to the oil water separator. The area being drained at the fuel islands is underneath a canopy. The canopy extends 5 feet beyond the tributary area to those catch basins to minimize the amount of rainfall contribution to any potential spills. So the only product going into the oil water separator in a normal operation would be wind-driven rain or water tracked onto the slab. The spills are, well, there may be some. There's normally a cleanup kit on the site, on the fuel island with diapers that are oilophilic, that will absorb petroleum product but don't absorb water. And kitty litter, absorbent, was typically also available on the fuel island to address any incidental spills that might occur. As far as the safety of the tanks, well, let's go through the slides. So this is looking west with the area where we're working outlined. Next slide. This is the same basic plan with a couple of changes that we made. If you can see here, this is now the location of the sump pump. At that location, we had it up here, and we realized that piping it across to the oil water separator or to these bays would require tearing up paving. So we're going to run piping from here up around in dirt and not have to take up paving or concrete. I have recommended that we take the lights, the future parking lot lights, and move them to the east landscape strip rather than up here, so that we can run the electrical with phase one and not have to, again, tear up paving to put those in the future. I do not see that as having any significant impact on the photometric plan, but we can provide an updated plan at such time that we do phase two work, or if we include them with phase one. But that's my recommendation. I haven't gotten approval from staff to do that. The above ground tanks, let's go to the next slide. So we have underground fuel piping from the tanks to the fuel island, and we're running it around the existing water line that is there. We didn't want to cross that. The piping, it's a flexible pipe that's a double wall pipe inside a duct or conduit. Here is shown the catch basin drains going to the oil water going to the pump and running up to these bays. And the existing 1,500-gallon oil water separator is there. Next. The fuel island, fairly straightforward, one gasoline dispenser with able to fuel vehicles on either side. So we have 2 fueling positions for the gasoline dispenser, a card reader, a 4 to 500 gallon diesel exhaust fluid tank with dispenser on the island, and then a diesel dispenser for 2 fueling positions. One change, that was something I misunderstood, the water fill for the tank truck is not going to be overhead. It's just going to be a standpipe that comes up 3 feet off the ground with a connector. Next. The tanks themselves meet all code requirements for above-ground fuel facilities. The tanks are 2-hour fire rated. That means that in the event of a hydrocarbon pool fire, for 2 hours, the product inside the tank will not raise in temperature enough to reach the lower flammable limit. So if there were a pool fire, which is not possible here because there's no way to create a pool of hydrocarbon, I mean, it would run away or flow off. So for 2 hours, the product inside the tank would be safe. The tanks are anchored to concrete footings, which are engineered for seismic events, that the tanks will not move in an earthquake, or at least not be damaged. I mean, they'll move with the earth. And they're also engineered for wind loading in the event of an empty tank subject to high winds. It won't roll over. Next slide. So this is a typical above-ground tank installation. We have fill boxes for the fuel connection from the delivery truck. They contain up to 15 gallons of product. Should it be spilled, will be contained within the fill boxes. The above-ground piping transitions to underground piping through a sump that is accessible, and all the connections are accessible, and it has a leak sensor. So should there be any liquid in that sump, the sensor can determine whether it's water or petroleum product. If it's water, we get an alarm. If it's a petroleum product, we get an alarm and shut off. So it automatically shuts off if the sensor detects a fuel product in the sump. Next. Here's a closer picture of the fill boxes. The one on the right, the diesel fill, is just a single connection. The one on the left has 2 connections. One is for product being pumped into the tank, and the second fitting with the red cap is vapor return. So for every gallon of gasoline put into the tank, a gallon of vapor is returned to the delivery truck. And that's air pollution control system. That was considered stage 1 back 30 years ago when they required that. Stage 2 is collecting vapor return from the vehicle when you're being fueled. That's where you have that elephant snout bellows around your fill pipe. That is not required at this site because we're significantly below the threshold of volume of fuel. So we do not need stage 2 vapor return. Otherwise, we'd be running a second pipe all the way back to the tanks. Next. Here's a typical top of the tank. This area here, that's the fill pipe coming in, so this is a diesel tank. This is a clock gauge, which is a manual float gauge, so if the electronics fail, you have a digital readout, mechanical readout of the volume of fuel in the tank. This is the head of the turbine, which is a submersible pump that sits in the bottom of the tank and pushes the product out to the dispensers. Back here is a electronic fuel level gauge that measures the fuel volume, the fuel temperature, and provides statistical leak detection. So it adjusts for temperature, and if there's a change in volume other than when product is being dispensed, you get an alarm. There's a manway access, so if ever the tank need to be inspected, you can get inside the tank. We have a standard vent pipe, which is has a vacuum pressure vent cap. So it's normally closed, and only with excessive pressure or excessive vacuum does that open. So again, that's an air pollution control device, so they're not atmospherically vented constantly. Beyond that, we have 2 emergency vents. These are normally closed and would only open in the event of an explosive event inside the tank, which again is highly unlikely, but theoretically possible. One of those is for the interstitial space. So these are double wall tanks. So we have an inner and outer tank. So one vents the space between the tanks, and the other vents the primary tank. Again, in an emergency explosion. And that's so that the tank doesn't rupture. Because they learned that the hard way a few decades ago. The pipe is shown on the right. There's the white primary pipe, and then you can see the light blue corrugated section. That is the secondary containment pipe. So if there were ever a leak or a failure of the primary pipe, this area would contain any leak, and it would send it back to the sump at either end, where a sensor would trigger an alarm, or in this case, a shutoff. And that flexible pipe is inside a 4-inch duct, which actually provides tertiary protection from any potential leaks. Next. So the transition sump at the tank, it's fairly straightforward. We do have a shutoff valve and a flexible fitting so that in a seismic event, if the tank should move differently than the ground, we won't have a pipe break in the product piping. At the dispenser, this is a typical dispenser sump, although this one has gasoline, regular, super, and diesel. That's what these 3 shear valves are. And the shear valves provide protection if the dispenser is dislodged from its mounting. So they're double poppet shear valves, and the valve actually breaks apart, and each poppet is in the opposite halves of that valve. So if this dispenser were completely removed from the base, it would not drip water out, or gasoline. Similarly, the pressurized piping coming in, that poppet would also close. That double poppet is also fitted with a fusible link. So in the event of a fire, if the link would melt and the double poppets would close. So the Hollywood special effects you see are technically not possible, but it makes good for movies. Next. Here's a typical, well, this is a full retail station, but shows the piping coming into the dispenser sumps. It shows the conduit runs, the island forms that support the dispensers prior to concrete being poured. Also, you have a catch basin and drainage piping. The electrical conduits are PVC up to 10 feet from the termination. The last 10 feet of the electrical conduit run has to be rigid conduit, and they have to terminate in explosion-proof fittings. Next. So this is what the finished facility, or this is similar to what the finished facility would look like with the gasoline dispenser, card reader, diesel dispenser, and a DEF tank, a DEF dispenser and storage tank with above-ground tanks beyond. Any questions?
So just real quick, so from a security standpoint, I think that was something that folks were concerned about. These tanks are going to be kind of similarly like what you would see at a Carson or a Pack Pride, where you have the above-ground tanks. They're typically on a pad. There's bollard posts protecting them, fencing around that most likely, and then piped to a fuel station 60, 80 feet away.
Correct.
Got it.
Now, the code requires that the tanks be in a fenced area.
Gotcha.
The Public Works facility is fenced. So
So
we
it means-
believe that satisfies the code requirement for the tanks being in a fenced area. If that were not adequate, we could put a fence around the tanks themselves inside Public Works.
I don't know about, I think it's just more of a, does it meet the code? I don't know that a fencing inside a fencing is going to be in our purview, to be perfectly honest. I'm just more curious.
Chair Olson, I don't really think that is something that really we need to go down the path on that. I believe that the applicant has provided documentation here. I do want to point out a few things. It's not like that's a vacant site. Canby Fire Satellite Station is there. And I also wanted to point out that I see this really as an essential public facility at Public Works, not to forget about the ice storms that we had a few years ago and the fires that we had a few years ago. So to fuel the vehicles and make sure that we're able to be responsive, this is important, I think, from that perspective. It is part of the Public Works Operations Campus, and so just wanted to point that out as well.
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission?
I was just curious if the earthquake seismic controls are up to a certain level of earthquake.
I honestly don't know whether it goes to a level, seismic zone 6 or 7 or 8. I don't know what the code requires, but they are engineered to the code requirements for seismic protection. The footings that support those tanks are about 5 feet wide, 12 feet long, and 3 to 4 feet deep. The tank is not going anywhere. I should also point out that the tanks are double wall steel, so you have 1/4-inch steel with 2 inches of insulation and 1/4-inch steel that provide ballistic protection up to about 50 caliber.
That's what I was curious about too. Thank you.
And Commissioner Driscoll, I think if the applicant can confirm this, but I believe the application here is pretty common for Public Works facilities to have above-ground tanks. So I'm guessing that's more what you see in the field.
It's becoming very prevalent primarily because of the cost of underground pollution insurance. It's only possible if you have a larger facility. Your corner gas station doesn't meet the clearance requirements because the tanks have to be 25 feet from a building and 25 feet from a property line, which we satisfy in this design. But most gas stations don't have the room to put above-ground tanks in. So they have no choice but to continue to maintain their underground tanks, which are also double wall tanks, either fiberglass or fiberglass wrapped steel.
Excellent. Unless there are more questions, I think we can turn to,
There are more questions.
we do have more questions? I didn't see. Go ahead.
So do
Go ahead. Take it away.
I have some discussion, but no questions.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. Okay, first of all, I'm going to show how old I am. The last time I put in one of these things, we had to put containment around it, containment walls around it.
Correct.
And that obviously is not code anymore, not necessary?
It is.
Okay,
If you have a single wall.
single wall tank, okay.
They require containment and a 100-foot setback from property lines.
Okay, so given the proximity of the wetlands, the natural areas that we've got around here, was there any thought to putting containment walls in just in case we had the outside possibility chance? And I realize that all your fuel bungs and everything are on the top and, you know, we're good. But being so close to our natural areas, our eco areas, and the state land and so on and forth, was that talked about at all, putting containment walls in?
We never discussed it because the double wall tanks, each tank has its own containment.
Okay,
And there are no bottom openings in the tanks.
right.
We did, before we got Peter on board, we went and visited a lot of different facilities, ODOT and all them, and we asked about that because we were concerned about the stream area.
Okay,
And they were explaining to us it was unnecessary because they had one in Portland that was continuing to get shot, but it just, I think, Peter, tell me if I'm wrong, but it just drains into the inner containment. And it was more of a, on the double wall tanks, it holds everything. It was unnecessary
I
to,
mean, if a tank were shot, it would penetrate the outer wall
yep,
and highly unlikely to penetrate the second inner steel wall. So you wouldn't have a release if the outer tank shell were punctured.
yeah.
okay. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm just, the outer wall on these tanks, I mean, that's a 12,000 gallon tank. So if it penetrates the outer wall, and let's just say it was a bad day and it penetrated the inner wall also, you're saying that that's still going to leak?
Correct. I mean,
Okay.
If you had a penetration of both inner and outer shells,
Right.
product above the level of that penetration
Is gonna-
would be squirting out a half-inch hole, say. Probably squirt out 20 feet.
Okay, so my question is, have we thought this through as far as just the proximity to the state land, the wetlands, the river? We've got 2 creeks, 2 waterways there that we're close to, so.
The other part of that also is the storm containment that's on the fence line. It would go into that first, and that would be did we figure the capacity of that?
It's a slope, not a containment.
We're gonna actually turn it more into
A swale?
A swale
Okay.
to catch all of any stormwater.
Okay.
I know that was a question. We didn't think we were gonna be able to fit it, but the way we're changing phase 2 as we go, it would hold everything.
Okay,
Well, it could easily be engineered to contain 12,000 gallons.
Yeah.
I mean, we have enough lineal footage of a 2-foot deep swale would probably handle the entire capacity of a full tank. And the tanks by law can only be 90% full, so they're not
sure.
full 12,000 gallons if
Sure.
we're splitting gallons.
Okay, all right, good. I'd like to see something,
The swale's a
Just
easy
in-
thing to do.
just in case it's never going to happen, and it does.
Absolutely. yeah.
Okay.
You never know.
So we talked about containment. The other thing, can we go back to the site plan map? That'll work right there. So one of the things that I didn't see in this is travel. There's no arrows for travel of cars and so on and so forth. And I know you guys are really good at painting lines and arrows and whatnot.
Yep.
So I'd like to see that as to where your trucks are going to come in and,
I'd be happy to point it out to you.
oh, is it on here?
No, I mean, I can point it out with my pen.
Oh, okay. Well,
I did not include the traffic turning circles because they get somewhat confusing. But we've designed this to handle a 60-foot wheelbase vehicle. And the fire department has blessed the design, saying their vehicles can get in and out. But this area, first of all, this area is gravel. We're adding paving in here. I believe we are 25 feet wide. So the trucks would come in this direction. It's one-way traffic
This is when they're filling up, right?
when they're filling,
Okay,
and then they would exit out like that.
right. I figured they were either coming in one way or the other.
No,
I'd like to see some striping to get them going
Well,
in the right direction, and the cars.
We can put arrows in here.
Sure.
We can paint arrows here, but it's one-way traffic in, and we want to do counterclockwise circulation so that we minimize crossing traffic. We have, the islands are moved to the north, so we have queuing space on the south side.
Okay,
So is your, so are you going to have the striping on the pavement?
Saying if the planning commission feels that's necessary, we can put paint stripes or arrows on the plan, on the ground.
Commissioner Llewellyn, what my kind of plan was is get this thing built and see how the traffic patterns are and stripe it so that it works with the flow on everyone, how they fuel, their rhythm, everything else. We do so much blacking out and stuff, we kind of wanted to wait on it to see.
okay, and I'd like to see it for the parking lot,
But
too.
you guys know we're not afraid to stripe.
No, I know that. And so I'd like to see it for the parking lot, just ingress, egress, and then for the new fuel card station, I think that would just be a wise idea.
We've kind of already started the striping out
Okay.
there, and we've been, we just were messing around with different kinds of just painting, and we actually put in diagonal parking just recently to promote that one-way flow, just with striping to see how it works, and if you come down to a meeting at Public Works, you'll see, and I think it's going to flow well.
Okay. And then as far as traffic flow is concerned, and I can't quite tell on this map, now, they said that there weren't going to be trucks with trailers. Is that correct? So the fuel trucks are not going to have trailers behind them?
No, typically, the fuel trucks need to have a pump to get the product into the tank. And the pumpers are just 2-axle or 3-axle vehicles. They don't have the trailers set up. It's a bobtail that usually does the delivery.
Okay, so I'm looking at this, I can't quite tell if there is enough room. I'll use my fancy dancy deal. So our trucks are, I'm assuming, are going to come in here, and they're going to pull up here and park to offload?
I anticipate them coming through the card lock facility and making a left turn,
So they're going to come here,
yes, and then,
here?
no, they'll be parallel to the long axis of the tanks. So they'll be along there.
Okay, so they're going to pull in here and come here?
Correct.
Okay,
And the reason for that is that the driveway up into the Public Works barns has a slope to it.
Okay.
And the trucks need to be near level.
Right.
To avoid retainage.
okay, all right. So, and we've got enough room to do all that, Jerry, right?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
Good.
Yeah, we talked about that with the wastewater plant. That's the only thing behind there. And
Okay.
There's so minimal traffic in and out of there. It's just coming and going, and there would still be a lane open to
Okay.
get around them.
All right, good. Let's see.
The
So
nice
the-
thing about that too,
Okay.
sorry to interrupt you, is the trucks, we actually decided, I think it was planning that recommended putting the tanks up there.
Mm-hmm.
And we actually benched the whole thing down. We're going to put a wall around it. So it's set at low and it's on a nice slab up there. And it's kind of at grade level. It'll be the top of the curb, so it's nice and flat. Like if you did have a spill or something, we thought you could contain it real good with piles of sand and stuff like that. It's easy to get to. It's out of the way. The truck's up there fueling. It doesn't affect the trucks coming in that are
Okay.
getting fuel and stuff, so.
Okay,
And that's something I forgot to point out in my presentation is we're adding a retaining wall here in order to get that level area.
We-
I had not, in the submittal package, we did not have a retaining wall.
So these things are actually going to set down just a little bit.
We pushed them down as low as we could just to
Good.
hide them.
Good.
And we wouldn't need the wall. We could slope the grass. It just, we thought for easier for maintenance to put a wall in and then just have a flat area for mowing for
Okay.
grass.
I see that. I think that's wise. So we have that. One quick question that I had in thinking about this and thinking about some of the stuff the city council talked about as far as emergency services to the community. Are we going to have a generator hooked up to these things? Can we get the fuel out of these things if we lose power?
We have a generator installed on an automatic transfer switch that runs the entire facility and the fire station with 600 gallons of fuel in it.
Okay, and these are going to be hooked, these will be powered up when that? Okay,
Everything,
excellent.
everything at that whole facility will be ran off that generator.
Okay, good. The only other question that I've got, my last and final, is these fuel trucks that are coming in. I really want these fuel trucks to come down 99, hit Territorial, and come down to this site. I do not want them coming up Knightsbridge and hitting Birch or where Baker, yeah, whatever, and coming through town. I don't want 12,000 gallons of fuel coming through town. We've got a way to come up 99. I don't know where they're coming from. I don't know if they're coming from Oregon City or,
They're gonna,
Up in Willbridge area by the St. John's Bridge.
okay, so they're going to come in through Oregon City. So I just really would think it would be wise of us if we're going to do this, bringing this much,
yeah, Territorial.
bombs on wheels into town, if we can bring them down Territorial and just notify those fuel that that's the way they're supposed to come.
And that's the shortest distance to get to the site from the terminal.
Yeah, right, if they're coming from that way, but if you happen to change vendors and it comes from I-5, we still need them to come down 99 and come down Territorial.
Regardless of the vendor, the fuel supply is up in Willbridge by the St. John's Bridge.
Okay,
They can't get fuel
Okay.
anywhere else.
all right, well, I was at the traffic committee meeting and the gentleman was telling us how he followed a tanker with a trailer up Knightsbridge Road and across Knightsbridge. And I just want to
Yeah.
dispel that if we possibly can.
We
So
can't say it would never happen.
I know, just like the tanks will never leak, right? I think that answers all my questions.
The other thing I wanted to add is we currently do have a small fuel station there with containment.
How many gallons you have on site now?
We have 1,500 gallons of diesel and 500 of gas, and we didn't have that 1,000. We had 500 and 500 during the ice storm, and we were literally between water treatment and wastewater, we were literally like 2 hours from running out of fuel during the ice storm.
Right.
And if we would have gone much longer, we would have problems. So that's the convenient thing is. And in the future, they talked about it in last week's council meeting, work session, that we're going to be potentially having a water treatment facility put down there. So this will be a very convenient spot to have diesel if we have another outage like that.
I am so happy to hear all of that.
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yep.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hutchinson, you said you had something?
Mainly just a couple of discussion points based on my personal experience. A couple of golf courses that I've taken care of for the city of Portland, Colwood and Rose City. Rose City routinely gets its double-walled steel tanks drilled into because the tank is, the maintenance facility is down below grade level, kind of down in a little canyon, and the tank is located behind that. And even though that is in a relatively nice neighborhood, that tank has been, for the most part, decommissioned for their use because they got to get it repaired, and they're still having problems with figuring out issues with security. Colwood, however, which is in a much worse neighborhood, but the fuel tank is right out in the open, and you can see it from Columbia Boulevard. You don't even have to come down any of the access roads to tell whether someone's screwing around with that thing or not. And so my tendency is to not hide them, because not only do you, if you can see them, you can see if something's happening to them. The other thing is, I'm sorry, I lost it. But mainly my point is that I don't think, and the riparian areas that this is very close to, I was noticing that the fill stations were close to that, but I like the fact that the fuel storage tanks have been moved more to the interior of the property, which get a little more distance between the massive amounts of fuel and the places where it can do the most damage. And I believe that is it for me. I just wanted to mention that about my personal experience with above-ground fuel tanks. Oh, and the ability to see leaks. That's a huge thing. I mean, just being able to tell whether they're taking any damage, whether they're corroding, anything like that down on the ground, it's just a big old mystery.
We are proposing to have a concrete slab continuous under these tanks, so it would be very obvious if fuel were running across the concrete as opposed to if it were above a gravel bed.
Yeah, and it's got slope towards the road, which we have people driving by there all the time. So it would be noticed, and I can see it from my office window, which is nice too.
Commissioner Jarosh, since we can't really see you on the camera, I can't tell if you have any questions or discussion items you'd like to bring forward.
Well, thank you. I don't have questions for Peter. I do have questions for Jerry based on his report that he submitted. Are we waiting for another presentation for that, or?
I think we're following the protocol per case.
I don't understand what that means.
So in other words, we're going through the whole process, and then we're going to go through the process for the second hearing, correct, Don?
So Commissioner Jarosh, I think the answer is we'd like your comments now, your questions now,
Okay.
because for this hearing. There will be a hearing behind this, but now is the time to ask your questions.
I just didn't know if Jerry had a separate presentation, so thanks. My question is really a little bit about the traffic flow and the efficiency. I mean, this whole thing makes sense to me, and I certainly don't have any questions about the parking lot, but the report primarily said this is for efficiency's sake, which makes sense. I'm trying to understand, though, Jerry, maybe you can help me. So when I think about the public works vehicles that are there now that have to travel elsewhere to get fuel, that makes so much sense that, of course, it's more efficient that they can get kind of one-stop shop where they sit, they can be fueled up. But what I didn't quite understand was who else will in the future be coming there for fuel? Will the other fire stations come there to be fueled up? Will the police come there to be fueled up, and Canby Transit? I'm trying to understand the differences between the ins and the outs.
Right now, the fire and Canby Utility are on board with this. I think they will be fueling there just because of the congestion down at the Pacific Pride at the other end of town. It's the school's over there. There's a lot of traffic. Everyone else is fueling up there. The school buses sometimes, everything else. So it's busy. So I think they're still going to continue to have their Pacific Pride cards. So if they're on that side of the town, they would probably fuel over there. But if they're over working on our side, they would get fuel with us. Transit is the only one at this point that hasn't decided if they're going to be fueling there. They're looking into it. I don't think it made sense for them. I think it was closer to go the other way. They got Todd Woods got everything down to the second with them buses on what's most efficient. So,
Okay.
but police would probably be the same. They would keep their pride cards, or if they're on this side of the town, fuel here.
Okay, that makes sense.
Answer
Thank
your
you.
question?
It did. Thank you, Jerry. So there in the report, it mentions, I think it's an estimate from the traffic study that there would be estimated 50% increase in the traffic coming in. Does that make sense?
Emma, can you address that? Commissioner Jarosh, I think that may be over the entire day, not during peak. So that's my belief.
Yeah, and that's okay. So what I'm trying to understand is based on, so if today, I'm just going to make this up. So if today there are 10 vehicles going in there to fuel, tomorrow there will be 15, a 50% increase. Is that right?
That's correct, Judy, and the report did both 50% increased AM, PM, peak, and daily trips.
Right.
So I know the daily trips increase 110, and I can find the other numbers if you'd like.
Oh, that's okay.
That would
So I had that 50% number in my head, trying to think of, like Jerry answered, who those people are, and that makes sense. If the police are on that side of town, they'll go in there, and if the fire trucks are over there, they'll go in there. But when I was looking at the neighborhood meeting minutes, and it came up in the neighborhood meeting, and it said the traffic study that was done and that there would be minimal traffic impact. So I'm trying to reconcile that word minimal with the 50%.
So the traffic study indicated that there's a potential for 110 trips a day, which would relate to 55 vehicles. My understanding is the city doesn't operate 55 vehicles. That the total number of vehicles within the city that would be fueling is less than 55. So the traffic study is much more conservative than reality, because you don't have every vehicle in the city fueling every day.
Right. So it sounds like there's some unknowns. I mean, if you add up all the fire equipment and the police and maybe the buses, that hasn't been decided. It depends on where they happen to be at that moment. I don't think we know. I would think there'd be more than 50 vehicles.
Yeah, Commissioner Drosch, I wanted to add one more thing, that here just several years ago, Canby Utilities shared that facility with us.
Okay.
The trips were in and out, with, I don't know, I forget how many employees. Was there 20? 20 Canby Utility employees that moved to the other side of town that went away.
Right.
I don't
Okay.
know how that fits into the traffic study, but I see it being comparable back to that.
And Commissioner Jarosz, just one more thing. I won't debate the word minimal, but it does meet all city requirements. There are no traffic signal warrants. This is not triggering any off-site improvements, and it's consistent with transportation standards.
Yeah, I understand that. Thank you. I did read that. Yeah, I'm just trying to think, if we told the neighborhood that it's minimal traffic difference, and that's the quote from the notes, that seems not correct to me.
The only thing I can say is we have a public hearing tonight. If folks have concerns with that, this is the venue for that review process.
Okay, so even if there was something in the only neighborhood meeting, and it says, quote, there will be minimal traffic impact, and how do we inform those people maybe that that's not quite right?
I don't have a great answer for you on that. I think that there's a public process that we're addressing here tonight, and that's part of that. I can't really answer it directly, but I would say that the traffic that's being generated, in my opinion, is not significant. The word minimal, if that was used, I'm not sure what to say on that, but the traffic generation is not significant from staff's perspective on this.
Okay, and it's not a question of if that word was used, it's in the notes, Don,
Yeah,
so it's in a minute.
I used that word during the neighborhood meeting. And I don't know how many thousand cars per day drive on Territorial, but if there are 1,000 or 2,000 cars a day on Territorial Road, having 110 more trips, which actually is only 55 vehicles, that's minimal compared to the existing traffic.
I would like to add just one metric that I think really gives a light to this, is that the VC increase. So the traffic study is a TAL, not a traffic impact analysis, and based on concerns on Territorial, Dawn and I asked DKS to evaluate the intersection, and the VC increase is only 2% for the 110 daily trips.
Right, for that intersection. So where did the 50% number come from? Is it just the road that goes back to the facility? It's confusing. There is a number that says 50%.
If there, 200 trips currently per day, there's 50% potential increase. But again, I maintain that the traffic study was highly conservative and far exceeded actual traffic.
This is Jenny. Every time I've ever gone back there, it's a very quiet place.
Yes.
So if there's very few trips happening in the course of a day and then half again added to that, it's still really minimal, I think, volume-wise.
And I think that's a good point, Commissioner Driscoll. I think from this observation, you have to have a reason to go back there, and part of that is really being part of the public works operation or having a purpose for going back there. So the general public isn't really driving back there to, I mean, that's my perception.
Okay, I just
so-
have one other question. Do we have any sort of estimate of how often a fuel delivery will occur?
I had this all.
We had that calculated out, and I believe it's like once every 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay, thank you. That's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner Drosh. Commissioner, oh my gosh, Driscoll, sorry.
It's okay.
Sorry, mine went blank.
It's okay. I've got a couple little ones, but I think I'll just mention, in terms of transit for the fuel, anytime I was ever in St. John's and coming down this way, I would always take 405 to 5 or 5 down. People are going to be bringing that fuel in off of 5. You have to really go out of your way to get on 99 from 205. So just throwing that out there. I don't think realistically anybody's going to take a huge detour around the 99. They're going to want to come up from, they're not going to go 205 to 99 and come in that way. If anything, they would take 5 to 205 and take 99 around, and realistically, they'll probably want to go through town.
So I'm not aware of any convenient way to get from I-5 to 99 with a fuel truck, unless you're coming from Woodburn.
Or you would come all the way down I-5.
You'd take the Wilson.
Come all the way down I-5 and take the,
Charbonneau
Take
exit or the
the,
Canby exit.
what exit is it?
It's either
Charbonneau
Charbonneau or the Canby exit, which,
That would be the easiest way for a truck to get there.
I'm not familiar with that.
and that's okay. I was just throwing that out there,
East-west.
just,
You got a good traffic
Yeah.
safety committee that keeps an eye on things.
yeah. Okay, so the two questions that I had, not related to that comment. So in the new fuel island, and we're looking at kind of giving the direction to come down and around into it, can vehicles fuel up both the diesel and unleaded fuel from either side? Because, you know, like with regular cars, sometimes the fill up's on the left, sometimes it's on the right. Will they be able to,
Yes.
if everyone's coming in that direction, be able to fill up
Yeah,
wherever
I
they
mean,
need
you'll
to?
have to choose which side of the island to drive up to.
But you could get both kinds of fuel
Yes.
from it. Perfect. And then the other question I had is, what happens if there is a flooding event and these tanks are underwater? I don't think they'd ever flood so much that they're completely underwater, but if they're partially underwater, does that have any impact, or since all the controls are at the very top, it doesn't matter?
An empty tank with the concrete footings provided will not float if it were completely submerged.
Okay. So, but having water up to any level really wouldn't matter, because
Correct.
I didn't think so, but I did want to clarify. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Llewellyn? Okay. Commissioner Ellison? Commissioner Hutchinson? Anything for you? I think then we can close the discussion portion and move into the proponent. If there are any proponents that would like to speak to this project, now would be the time. Seeing none online or in the crowd of hundreds that are attending in person. Opponents, do we have any opponents for the project, either online or in person? Seeing none. That would lead me to believe that there aren't any rebuttals either. So we will close the public hearing for the DR 23-04 and CUP 23-02, Public Works Fueling Facility and Parking Lot, and move into our discussions amongst the hearing body. Just taking a temperature in the room, is there anything that, starting at this end, that is a debatable item for you?
Not for me,
Allison?
no.
Commissioner Hutchinson, anything for you?
Seems fine to me. I mean, everything was pretty much well thought out. I really think that, I mean, it's nice that they're keeping large areas of gravel, you know, so that we don't have massive amounts of non-permeables out there. And looks like they've dealt with any kind of spillage or transfer issues. And, you know, I feel pretty comfortable with the quality of the equipment going in, and fleets chew up a lot of fuel. I've had to work on a couple of different varieties of those, and this one looks much more pleasant than some of the ones I've had to shoehorn my vehicle into. So I think everyone's going to be pretty happy with it.
Commissioner Ewert?
I'm all for it. I think we need it. I think it's going to be an addition to our community. I like seeing my tax dollars spent in this way. I would like to see, for conditions of approval, I'd like to see the striping get done. Once you get this done and you know where you want to put the striping, I think it would be good to have the directional flow as far as traffic flow marked out well. Not only for the trucks, but the cars in the parking lot. The other thing that I would like to see added is I'd really like to see, when you guys are doing this and moving dirt out there, that you put some kind of a swale in on that, what it would be the north side of that property line?
East.
East side?
Yep.
Okay, so the east side of it. And then tell I'm directionally challenged. And then
Are you making that part of, making that a part of a conditional approval?
I will when
Yep.
when
Roger.
I make a motion. And then the other thing too is that I really want to see those fuel trucks, whoever your company is that's delivering your fuel, I really, really want them to come down 9090 and Territorial. I want them notified, and as far as I'm concerned, if the police find them any place else other than that, they can ticket them as far as I'm concerned. So that's an issue with the traffic committee. I've overheard discussions with that, so.
The delivery contract.
Yeah, when we're ordering fuel, we just request that's the route they take.
Yeah, man, you know, the other businesses around are supposed to do the same thing, but I hope that you guys are the shining example, and
Yeah,
I would like to see that happen. So those are the only three things I have. Other than that, the generator thing, the design and whatnot sounds to me like, looks to me like it's pretty state of the art. So I'm good with it. Something we need.
Commissioner DeRoche, any thoughts for the committee?
No, I don't have anything, specifically burning. I guess for me, I read what I had, and it primarily said it was for efficiency, which made sense. And now that we've been through it, I can see, a tremendous amount of benefits, which maybe I should have realized that before, but that's not what the report said. So I was looking at that, and to me, the efficiency perspective is still a little airy-fairy. We don't really know how many vehicles will use it. And will it save tax dollars? I don't know if we know, because we don't know when people might be using it versus what they're using today. And so anyway, that would be my only point, but I don't see that as something I'd fall on my sword about.
Thank you. Commissioner Llewellyn.
Yeah, I really underscore what Commissioner Ewert said. I think I'd like to see those as conditions, and even if not that many people were to use that, I still think it's a great backup plan. So I'm all for it. I think it's a good project.
Commissioner Driscoll.
I agree. Seems like a good project, and you guys did a really nice job with the design of everything. I think it's great to have it there on the north side of town, because if we did have a big seismic event, you're not going to be able to get over the railroad tracks, and Knightsbridge is going down, so the north side of town is going to be isolated. It'll be very helpful to have power, from the field to get out of that. So.
Thank you. I think it was a great presentation from Emma. Thank you for that, and thank you both for answering all the questions. I think this is going to be a great project for.
And Chair Ellison, I had to step out for a moment, but just want to make sure that we offer opponents if there are any.
Already done.
Okay, awesome.
Yep,
Thank you.
Yep, we got it done.
Okay.
So with that, I will entertain a motion for DR 2304 and CUP 2302.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that we approve DR, let me get it here, hang on just a second. Stuck together. DR 23-04 and CUP 23-02 as submitted, and I'd like to see added to that the directional flow striping for the parking lot and for the card lock. I'd like to see a swale added, if possible, to that backside back there, just in case. And then I would also like to make sure that, just in case you're not there, whoever would succeed, would follow you, would make sure that those fuel deliveries are notified to be coming down 99E to Territorial.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
So we will take a roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Driscoll.
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Drosh, sorry.
Aye.
I'm an aye.
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 Very well, it is approved. And we're going to take a quick break. Thank you very much.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Welcome back. We're going to have Ryan Potter present on Canby Beer Library Modified Project DR 23-05 and VAR 23-02. Mr. Potter.
Chair Ellison, could you read the script
Did
before?
that at the beginning.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chair Ellison, and members of the Planning Commission. Ryan Potter, Planning Manager. Tonight, I will be presenting about the Canby Beer Library. This is related to applications DR 2305. That's a design review application, and also variance application 23-02. The location of this project is in downtown Canby, right across from Waite Park, or diagonally from Waite Park. It's on Northwest 3rd and North Holly Street. It is in the downtown core. It's our former public library. So for many years, this was the city's library, and we did sell it to the applicant team a couple years ago. And it's been planned for an adaptive reuse for the last couple years. And it is surrounded by a mix of other urbanized land uses, including residential, commercial, office, and others. Next, I'll talk about the zoning. It's in the C1 downtown commercial zone. You can see by the star on the screen. It's right in the middle of that red area. And then it's also in the overlay for our downtown zone, which has its own sets of guidelines and development standards. So the proposed project is an adaptive reuse project of the former library, and it would turn it into a commercial project, including two major components. The first would be an indoor brew pub on the more southern piece of the site, and then the other half approximately would be a semi-enclosed food cart, and that would include an area for the food carts themselves, and then a covered dining patio with a canopy over it. And in general, that area that's semi-open would have a perimeter wall with screening that would limit access when the facility is closed. Both elements of the project would be accessed from Holly Street, and the building overall, the envelope would match the building envelope of the current former library. There are two items for the design review that require a variance, a major variance. The first is a floor area ratio, and the second is glazing requirements. So this is the windows and doors that are along the public realm. And so I have a couple graphics here, but I will let the applicant, after this, they have their own presentation, so they'll go into the details of the design. But overall, this is the design. This is looking from as if you're above Waite Park, and so you can see there's the outdoor area with the food carts. There's the middle portion that is a covered dining terrace, and then to the right on this graphic is the indoor brew pub. And these are some renderings of the exterior views along the street, both on Holly Street and 3rd Avenue. So there's a number of criteria in the code that apply. All the usual suspects for design review. Like most things in downtown, both the C1 commercial zone and the overlay apply. And like I said, they have their own sets of overlapping guidelines and standards. Also, we have a new part of our code that was just approved last year that addresses food cart pods. Obviously, this project includes a food cart pod. And then also the variance section is not one that you always see with design review, but it's included here. So as you saw in the staff report, we go through all the code criteria. I'm just highlighting the high points here. Restaurants, drinking places, bars, brew pubs, food carts, all of these are uses that are explicitly allowed in the C1 commercial zone. So there's no conflict there. Parking, because it is in the commercial core, there's no off-street parking required. None is provided consistent with that. Signage, like a lot of projects, signage and lighting will be done at a later stage. So the signage application will come in separately from the land use review, and that's pretty common. Same with lighting. We get a lot of applications where they've got conceptual lighting, but they'll come back before the site plan review stage and provide a final lighting plan. And then the most complicated bit is the Canby overlay zone includes a number of complicated design-oriented development standards and design guidelines. And as you saw in the staff report, the project meets these to a degree with some qualifications. But staff just note here that a lot of the standards in this zone don't really contemplate this type of development. And so this project's a little unique in that it's not a fully enclosed building, like a lot of projects in downtown Canby are. As I said before, some of it's enclosed, some of it's not enclosed. And so that's where the project inhabits this a little bit of gray area when it comes to complying with some of the code requirements. And the main two of those that we'll go into are the two that require variances. And so the first of those is floor area ratio. And floor area ratio, which we call FAR, is really about the intensity of building that is allowed on a site. And so you can see this diagram just gives an overview. This is just something I lifted from the internet, but basically the idea is if you have an FAR of 1, that means the whole site is covered with building if it's 1 story, but then if you get 2 stories, then you only need to cover half the site, and so on and so forth. So it's really governing the amount of development, but not really having a bias on how much it covers of the site. You think of New York City where, a lot of the building mass is, you can build a really tall building, but it's because, maybe that's not a good example, I'm sorry. But you can see on the diagram, you can satisfy an FAR in multiple ways. Most buildings, including the former library that's on this site right now, look like the bottom middle of this diagram where you have an FAR of 1, which is a building that covers the entirety of the site with a single story building. So the minimum FAR in this section of this zone is 0.8. And so for most sites in downtown Canby, you have to have a building that covers 80% of the project site. This is analysis of how this project achieves that or doesn't achieve it. So you could see here, this is a rooftop view of this project. So you could see it's sort of in rough thirds. The third to the right, I'm blocking my numbers here. So the building that's fully interior is the brew pub, and that's 44% of the project site. And interiors of buildings is generally what you're considering when you think of FAR. It's generally referring to the inside of a building. But the other pieces of this project include an area in the middle that's roof only. That's the dining terrace that has a canopy over it and then perimeter walls, but it's not fully enclosed. And then you have the area on the far left that is open. And generally in the planning world, you wouldn't consider this for an FAR. Even though it's got an urbanized land use on it, it's not inside a building. And so, as shown in the applicant materials, they've attempted to get closer to this 0.80 FAR by utilizing pieces of the roof that create more roof coverage over the site that gets closer to 0.8. And so in this case, If you add the enclosed interior portion of the building with the portion that has a roof canopy, it gets to 74%, which is a lot closer than just the 44% that's the interior piece. And then also, if you go back to the renderings, and the applicant will have his own comments about how the project fulfills these criteria. I'm just kind of trying to give you an overview. But you can also see the middle third of the Holly facade. That part is even still not fully enclosed, but it kind of mimics the enclosure that a building would have. And so that was part of the applicant's strategy to get closer to that 0.8 by mimicking the enclosure of a building. So the second item needing a major variance is also related to the uniqueness of this project that's partially enclosed and partially non-enclosed. And that is the glazing requirement. So like a lot of downtown development standards in any community, we have glazing requirements that are really meant to add the transparency and the liveliness of a downtown. So when you walk down the street, you're not just walking by blank walls, you're walking by windows and doors and things that you can see inside and create more visibility. And that's where these requirements came from. So in this part of the downtown core, 60% of a primary facade is supposed to have glazing, so transparent windows, whether that's doors or sliding glass doors or windows. On the secondary facades, it's 50%. And then this third one is one that planning staff have always objected to a little bit. But we also require 50% to be glazing on alley-facing facades. I think some of the controversy with that is, obviously, there's a lot of alleys where there's really no reason to be looking onto the alley. So I can definitely see us changing this particular criteria in the future. But as of right now, primary facade needs 60%. That would be on Holly. And then the secondary and alley-facing facades would need 50%. Obviously, if you look at the renderings, the project doesn't directly achieve that to the letter. But if you do consider the brew pub, that the part of the project that's actually enclosed, it does meet the 60% if considered on its own. And that's another way that the applicant team has tried to get closer to meeting that requirement by creating a building that actually does achieve, and the sort of non-standard, atypical piece of the project, which is the food cart pod, attempts to meet it by partially enclosing it and having cut out screened areas that kind of mimic the cadence of windows. So when the Planning Commission considers these variances, there are 6 criteria in the code that you are supposed to consider. And I've just paraphrased them here because they're a lot longer in the code. But the first is, are there exceptional or extraordinary circumstances? Is the variance needed to maintain the same property rights as someone else in an equivalent site or an equivalent zone? Would there be a conflict with the comp plan or the municipal code? Would there be adverse impacts to the surrounding vicinity? And is the variance the minimum needed to actually alleviate the hardship? And then lastly, are the unique conditions or the exceptional unique pieces of the project that can't comply with the code, are they caused by the applicant? And so the staff report did go through planning staff's interpretation of how the project does or does not comply with these 6 code criteria for a major variance. Ultimately, our recommendation was that there was enough support to support granting the project of variance, but if you probably noticed in the analysis that we did defer to the Planning Commission to make their own conclusions. As I spoke about this before, there are some unique elements to this project, and that's largely based on part of it's enclosed and part of it's not enclosed. And obviously, when our code was written, it wasn't really contemplating a lot of the land uses and building typologies that we might put in our downtowns now. And so planning staff recognizes that some of the code criteria weren't thinking about having a semi-enclosed food cart pod, which we've all been to food cart pods. They're obviously a fixture of urban life, but at the time our code was written, it didn't really consider that. And so I would say something to consider as you think about these 6 criteria for variances is that we do allow food cart pods in the C1 zone. And so when planning staff was looking through these, looking at the project and looking what the code requires, we would discourage the Planning Commission from penalizing a project that if it were standalone, if it were a standalone brew pub and a standalone food cart pod, there would be no conflict because the brew pub would be by itself fully enclosed, would be fully able to meet these code criteria that a variance is being requested for. And a food cart pod wouldn't have to meet those because it wouldn't be a building at all. It just happens to be that this food cart pod is proposed to be attached to a building, and so all those code criteria sort of kick in. And so it's a little bit different. So I guess what I'm asking is that you consider, especially with the ones about maintaining the same property rights as others, if someone had a food cart project on another site, they wouldn't have to have glazing, obviously, because they would just be on a paved surface and you wouldn't have a roof or walls necessarily around it. So that's just something to consider. Comments received, we received no comments from the public, and agency and service provider comments, we received comments from all the usual suspects, the city engineer, Canby Fire, various departments of Canby Utility and our own Public Works, and then also Northwest Natural. And because this was a project that did come through before, there is an approved version of this project from 2 years ago. I'll just mention that all the utilities and hooking up to existing utilities has been discussed multiple times now. So there was a pre-app meeting for the original project, and there's also been a pre-app meeting for this version of the project. And so planning staff are confident that the utilities and services are adequate to serve the proposed project. There were 28 conditions of approval identified for the proposed project. Most of these are either standard conditions or ones that were previously attached to the approved version of the project. So none of these are really big surprises, and most of them contain standard text. A couple unique ones that I've just pulled out here are Canby Fire did require the building to have fire sprinklers. And then I just noted that a lighting plan is required. When we don't get that up front, we just have a condition of approval that requires that come in later. So based on the analysis and the conclusions in the staff report, the planning staff recommend that the Planning Commission approve both the design review application 23-05 and variance application 23-02.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. Before we get to the applicant, are there any questions for staff from the Planning Commission?
I have one about the east elevation. I'm looking at that and noticing that there is very little space between, what is it, Minuteman Press and that building, like what, a few feet? Like, can a person even get back in there? I kind of didn't think so. And so I'm kind of, I'm thinking about glazing requirements specifically in that case, and then, also facing the alley, that I don't have any problem varying with that, I don't think. I mean, do you even consider that part of the building that's obscured by the next building as part of the glazing requirements, that square footage of the facade?
You mean the northeastern facing facade?
Yeah, I'm
that
just, yeah.
Faces the reprographics company? No.
Yeah.
No, the variance is for the facade shown on the bottom, which is more facing Waite Park. And then also the Holly Street elevation, which, as you can see, there's the three components, and the rightmost component does have glazing, but the other two have metal louvered screens instead of glazing.
Thank you.
Just for clarification, when you say glazing, do you mean like the tent on the windows, like at the Dahlia building?
Glazing just meaning a transparent material that you can see through into the interior of a building.
Okay.
And usually that's glass.
You said the utilities have already been discussed multiple times, but I wasn't there for it. So I was just kind of curious, is there gas service just for the pods specifically, just one line, or are they being fed individually?
I will defer to the applicant when they present to answer that, but one thing I was going to mention in my presentation, and I kind of glossed over it, was the fulfillment of the food cart pod criteria. This project is actually really uniquely great at fulfilling those criteria because it is being integrated into a building where the utilities can be run underneath. You see a lot of food cart pods where things are being kind of run over the ground and having all kinds of things that need to be screened and stuff. And this is unique in that it's being planned this way from the ground up, and so a lot of the utilities will be hidden underground. But Bryce from the applicant team will definitely be able to speak to that better than I can.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner DeRoche?
I don't have anything. I just want to say thank you because this is a unique scenario, and reading the staff report, I think they did the best job possible in helping us wrap our heads around these unique features of it. And then the slides and the graphics and the slides made it that much more clear to me. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Ewert?
Quick question. I don't recall loading dock. Is there a loading dock in this building? I don't recall seeing one.
Yes, it would be on the back, on the alley.
On the alley side, and is it physically there now?
I believe so. No?
So,
But there's a door?
Yeah, so our plan is to put in an overhead door, and it would be approximately 85 feet back from the...
okay, we'll get,
Yeah, sorry.
you can talk about that when you get the seat. So loading dock has been discussed, and
And trash and recycling would also be in the alley.
okay, so it would be
And
in the alley.
screened.
All right, very good. That's all I have. Thank you.
Commissioner.
I'll save my other comments when he gets up here.
Commissioner Hutchinson? Commissioner Ellison? Good?
Good to go.
Okay. With that, we will move into the applicant presentation. Come on up.
Good evening, Commissioners.
Good evening.
Just bear with me one moment here. Good evening, Planning Commission, city staff. Bryce Morrow, founder of Oregon City Brewing Company. Thanks for having me here tonight. Really excited to bring this project before this body. A little bit about my company. We started this business in my garage. Started with my dad and my father-in-law, started cooking, and I say cooking, beer 5 gallons at a time in the kitchen. And we used to have heated bathroom floor, and I used to put the fermenters out there with glass carboys, and eventually my wife's like, you got to remove these out of the damn bathroom. This is too much. So anyhow, then we moved to a garage, and at the time, we were the only licensed brewery in a home occupation license in the state. Then when we decided to actually move into a legitimate facility, we got into this building, which is in downtown Oregon City at 1401 Washington Street in the north end of Oregon City. And we opened, let's see, it'll be 9 years here next month. We've been in business, and in a lot of ways, it was an adaptive reuse project. It was, the building was a site built as Stout Motor Company, and it was a Chrysler Imperial dealership. You can kind of see the little architecture of where you can see the gas station in the front there, upper left-hand corner, and you can see that it was a showroom. Over time, there hasn't been 1 square inch of this property that we haven't touched. We've fully renovated every single bit of it. The thing that has been most rewarding out of the project over the past 9 years has really been the impact on the neighborhood and the community. And I say that as I'm born and raised in Oregon City. I graduated from Oregon City High School. I used to work in the paper mill, Blue Heron paper mill. And growing up in Oregon City, there was a lot of vacancy on Main Street and boarded up. And so it's been a complete 180 over time. And it's so rewarding to know that we've had a part in that. And it's been a real transformative experience. It's not just us, but it's a real food and beverage destination. Oh, one thing I want to go over real quick. I did have a video to show, but I won't do it due to technical difficulties. We created, so Oregon City passed a municipal code to allow food carts in 2021. I had this 7,000 square foot parking lot that I leased out to the adjacent tavern for a number of years. During COVID, they couldn't pay rent. I thought, what am I going to do with this thing? When they passed the municipal code, then last April in 2022, we opened up a food cart pod. And it is 9 independently owned and operated food carts. It has a 1,800 square foot canopy structure that connects to our property, and it's been just absolutely terrific. So, the Canby Library building. It was site built in 1970 as Coast to Coast Hardware, and it really was 2 different buildings. So there was 6,000 square feet that would be to the left side of this photo. And then in 1975 was added on with an additional 5,000 square feet. Business was good enough that Walt added that piece. So it really is 2 different buildings. So I say that because I hope you can wrap your head around some of the design choices we've made. We're trying to adapt this building. We're not just tearing it down and then building right up. Otherwise, we probably wouldn't even I wouldn't be here before this body. In 1989, there was extensive renovation that was done to the property to transform it then into the Canby Library. And then it served the community for 26 years. A little bit of a visual background on what we've done to the project thus far. We purchased the property in December of 2021. Commenced on interior demolition in January of 2022. We took out all kinds of stuff. There was just mountains of drywall. There were not 1, not 2, but 3 drop ceilings. We recycled 7 tons of metal out of the property. Earlier this year, we completed the first phase of construction, which was structural and seismic reinforcing of the 1975 building, which is slated for the brew pub. We installed a 36-foot long glass storefront that you see in the lower right-hand image that faces Holly Street. The roof got new rigid R30 insulation above deck, and it has a 30-year TPO new roof on there, which was great because it was leaking. It has also 3 new skylights that were installed. These elevations are what I am proposing for Phase 2 to complete this project, which is to turn a vacant building that served the community for a long time, it's been vacant for the past 7+ years, into a food and beverage destination for downtown Canby. It would have 7 independently owned and operated food carts. There would be a large covered patio area that would be 4-season friendly. It would have gas heaters in the ceiling. And there would be the second location for my business, Oregon City Brewing, on the far right-hand side. It will be largely defined by the French oak barrels that you see up there. There will be 120+ French oak barrels. We do a great deal of aging for our beer program. And then there'll be packaging, bottling on site. Here's an overview of just a site plan of what it would look like from the interior. So there would be a large seating area, approximately 2,200 square feet of open seating that is adjacent to that glass storefront that's already been installed on Holly Street. There'd be the brewery area to the right-hand side, a bar. We're really excited about the cooler that'll be there, 800+ square feet of cold storage, 4 restrooms for the public. And then the next quadrant over is the large patio area, which will be 4-season friendly, and then the food cart area. Looking out, this would be a rendering from the backside of the canopy area. You can see the expanse of glass that connects the interior and exterior portions of the property. Those are actually sliders, so you can actually open up 40+ feet of the wall during warm season to have this nice inside-outside. There'll be radiant gas heaters, just like we have in Oregon City on the roof, so it'll be truly 4-season friendly. There'll be 3 oversized skylights in here to allow a lot of natural light. And this is really retaining the additional, the structure as much as possible. So we're trying to be creative with how do we keep this building and transform it so it can serve the community for the next 26 years. We have a little homage, you see to the far left-hand side, of a little library piece with books, et cetera, in there. And you can see visuals of how the architectural screening would be looking out here. If I was in the far back end of the patio, that would be almost like the Salem Blue would be right behind me, or the Minuteman Press, I'm sorry. I would be looking forward toward Holly Street, and you can see how the transparency, just like glazing, would be. I wanted to share this because we found all kinds of a treasure trove of artifacts within the library in doing demolition. You see a variety of student body cards here from Canby High that were left behind, a lot of floppy disk. I think those date it to the 80s and 90s, and certainly some library cards. I kept every piece of this stuff, so we plan on sharing this in the library in the future. I wanted to include this letter. This is from former Mayor Nancy Kopelk in the far right here, where she has this letter which is to the librarian at the time, and the librarian had written a dedication letter for the ribbon cutting of the library in 1990, and here she's chastising her in all caps, have someone proofread your copy. So anyhow, I thought it was great. So I've got the original of that. Okay, the reason why I share that stuff is this isn't just some other building. It's served the community for 26 years. It is not special architecturally. I will be the first one to say it might be the ugliest building in Canby. It's a beige concrete block building. We're trying to be creative to breathe life into it for the future and for its, and to reactivate that corner of downtown. But it is a special place, and I think it should be honored. So we're going to do the best that we can. We've tried to put a lot of the design and thoughtfulness into retaining that building, because I think that those people who over that 26 years, and I'm sure there's quite a few in this room who remember their experiences there, they should be able to carry that forward in the future. I think that's important for the community. Okay, getting into the staff report from Ryan, I thought was very thoughtful and detailed. I don't want to rehash the application piece, but I do want to go over the major variances because I realize that it is extraordinary in nature that I'm even asking for them. So I want to go over how we come about this. Variance request number 1, glazing 60%, that would be at Hawley Street on the primary facade, and then 50%, that would be 3rd Street in this case, secondary facade. Municipal code, a high degree of transparency helps create a sense of interaction between the activities inside and outside the building. In my mind, the design code was created 20-some years ago. The use that I am proposing was not thought of, but the intention was. And this body or city council or anybody is not going to get it right on the exact words. In this case, transparency in the municipal code is glazing, meaning a window. They couldn't have thought at that time. And you're not going to always get it right unless you continually update the code every single year, which is really not feasible. So the municipal code does, though, call out for the intention of things. And I think that's really critical to consider. So the high degree of transparency helps create a sense of interaction between activities inside and outside the building is semantics in my mind. Can you see through the architectural screening as proposed? Yes. Can you see the food carts? Can you see the people? Yes. Can you see through a window? Yes, absolutely. We're proposing 92% transparency along 3rd Street, 78% along Hawley Street. For comparison, the original library building when we took possession was 24.8%. Variance request number 2 is the floor area ratio, or FAR coverage is required to be 80%. In the municipal code, the purpose of the downtown Canby overlay zone is to encourage more intense development in the core commercial area. That is done through the FAR, or floor area ratio. It's all about density. Floor area ratio means a method of calculating structural massing on a lot. I believe it is once against semantics. We will be activating effectively 100% of this lot. If I had a 10,000 square foot parking lot, or let's just say bare dirt, I could put an 8,000 square foot building, and then I would have 2,000 square feet, and it could be a park, it could be open space, it could be parking, most likely, is what would happen. This space will be 100% utilized. We will have 8 businesses that will be in here that are independently owned and operated. It'll be a thriving place with a lot of customers coming and going, and it'll be home to 30+ employees. So the roof structure, and Ryan eloquently went over this in his report, it is 74%. And I didn't just come up with like, hey, let's make it 74, not 73%. That is structurally what the building is. So, the use of it is difficult where this property is is difficult to retrofit for the permitted use of the food cart pod. So we try to really come up with a thoughtful solution to accomplish that. One key piece at the very beginning of of why this body even exists, why there's a design review process, I love this part, is the purpose and objectives of site development requirements and the design review process are to encourage originality, flexibility, and innovation. That's what this is. They put this in here before the standards of the 5 or 6 criteria that I'm going to go over on the next page, because you're not going to get it all right. You're not going to be able to see 50, 60 years out and nail it every single time. I love the second piece also, discourage monotonous, unsightly, dreary, and inharmonious development. Okay, the other piece that is, and Ryan went over this just real briefly, the standards and criteria, those 6 pieces. I believe the authorization is just as important, which is the commission may authorize variances from the requirements of this title where it can be shown that owing to special and unusual circumstances related to a specific piece of property, the literal interpretation of the regulations would cause an undue or unnecessary hardship. The number one thing is I'm trying to reuse a building. And it's not just any building. It's the former library building that served the community for 26 years. If I was just building a new construction building, it would be lickety-split. I wouldn't be asking for variances. The first one, I'm just going to briefly go over these. Number 1 would be the exceptional or extraordinary circumstances. It's really about reusing a building versus new construction for the proposed use. And it goes along with number 2, which is the same property rights for the applicant, me, to maintain that versus any other property in the same zone. Should I have the same property rights that a parking lot would? I believe so. Number 3 on this, the granting of the variance will not be material or detrimental to the intent or purposes of the comp plan or land use development or planning ordinances. I believe we're going to be the opposite in that we are increasing density with effectively 100% site usage, and we are bringing 8 businesses into that small floor plate. And we might end up having the most transparent property in the entire city. Number 4, the granting of this variance will not be materially detrimental to the other property within the same vicinity. The beer library is going to really increase the value of the neighboring properties by activating a building that's been sitting there for 7 years and not utilized. It's going to turn that corner into bustling food and beverage destination. And I say this not only, I'm the one with the skin in the game taking the risk on this property, but I've done it before. And I feel the same thing about Canby as I did in Oregon City. And I know that because a lot of my customers live here and they always come in and bug me every time. They're like, what's the deal with Canby? We want to be there. So I think it's going to be great for all the neighboring businesses. It will give, and property owners, it will give them more optionality in the future than they have right now with this project. The variance requested, number 5, is a minimum variance that will alleviate the hardship. Boy, I've spent an inordinate amount of money and time on this project. I think I might have the running record with Don and Ryan, how many different projects and design criteria that I brought to them, different ideas. I've tried to utilize this structure that is lot line to lot line, completely taken up with a building that I can't tear down and that has already been awarded a grant from the Oregon Main Street for. So, coming up with a creative solution, I believe that I've put everything up against the wall and maybe too much. So it is the minimum that I can think of. Number 6, the exceptional or unique conditions of the property will necessitate the issuance of a variance were not caused by the applicant or the applicant's employees or relatives. No, that's not the case. And this isn't maybe the best view of it, but the architectural screening is effectively powder-coated steel columns. They will be place welded into the concrete footing that will be there. And then it is 2x2 cedar horizontal fencing that's dark stained. You can see right through it, and the property will be fully landscaped and irrigated. There will be a large park bench there it's approximately 30 feet long. That'll be great for the farmers market usage, for Waite Park. That's all I've got. I'd welcome any questions. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Bryce. That was a fantastic presentation. Appreciate all the heart and soul you put into that. I definitely can see how much feel how much this means to you. I think what we'll do, well, if we follow it to the letter here, we have 3 minutes for do we have any questions before we move on for the applicant?
I have a quick one. I was driving by your Oregon City facility one time when you were craning a food cart out. Looked like it was kind of tight in there. Is that going to be how the carts come in and out of here, or some of these panels are hinged, or?
Yes, it will be. Yeah, we've had great experiences with the crane operators. It is, so we didn't do that initially, I can tell you, because I put them in there myself with a front loader attachment, and you could just picture endless K-turns moving it into this confined space. The crane has been just terrific. It's easier on the food cart itself, on wear and tear. And these are permanent tenants. I mean, they will be on 1-year leases, but if my existing property is any indicator, they're going to be there for multiple years to come. So these carts don't move at all.
Thank you.
Yeah, I did have 2 items. Commissioner Hutchinson, you had asked a question about the elevation right next to the old Minuteman press, right? And I would show that. It's kind of an inaccurate elevation rendering. There is no, let me just share my screen one more time. Wanted to go over this. Actually, you can see it here. This is, it's exactly the lot line with the neighbor. And they built this thing, they are sharing the back wall. It's sharing a wall. I mean, there's no easement, there's no nothing. It's on that wall. We will be retaining that wall, and it'd have a strong back system that will go along there to seismically reinforce it. There'll have to be a large footing that would go the expanse. It'll have to be like 12 feet wide. But the strong back system would support that. And then it would all be epoxied in with dowels to hold the whole thing. So the previous rendering that was in Ryan's report, it showed it like set back, but there is no setback. It's exactly the same parallel. And then one question you had, Commissioner Driscoll, was for the utilities. So that there will be extensive pock marking of the existing slab that is there. So, and some lessons learned with my other project. We had propane tanks in Oregon City. This project will have natural gas. So there will be, the meter banks will be interior toward the back of the property, but they will be individually metered for each cart, and then they will have direct hardwired internet connection, water. They will have a direct to sewer connection that goes to a grease trap. Trying to think through all the things, before we cover them up with concrete. So learning a couple lessons over what I've done before, and then we get a chance to start fresh with a project with this one.
Commissioner Llewellyn, did you have anything? Commissioner Jarosh?
It was great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the work that you've put into this so far and the investment you're making in our city. Quick question. I didn't see in the conceptual drawings like heaters or that covered space where people will be sitting. And is that going to be natural gas on the ceiling?
There will be natural gas. We don't have renderings for that or the submittals for the HVAC package, but they will be, they would be akin likely to be those long ones that you see that are like a steel rod that's heated, and they heat objects and people, not the air, and they would be expanding it. So it'll be Four Seasons friendly. We have a separate company that I've worked with that just does that patio heating. You have to make sure that you get the distance just correct. Otherwise, you're going to fry somebody who doesn't have as much hair as me. So I'm not calling out anybody. So yes.
No love for Mr. Ewert.
There will be thoughtful heating there for Four Seasons dining.
Excellent. I figured that. And then my other just comment is the traffic study that came with your report was fabulous. I'm not familiar with that company, and in my time working with the Planning Commission, that's the best traffic study I've ever seen. So thank you for, contracting for that and to supply that to us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Ewert, you want to touch on the bald joke?
I didn't have anything to say, but now I do. Couple of things. Do you have a problem with adding the loading dock door, a wider roll-up door to the alley? As part of this, do you have a problem with that?
No,
Okay.
absolutely.
And the only reason I say that is because we're running into a little bit of problem that I'm seeing downtown where we have delivery trucks and pickup trucks that are staging out in the streets, and it's a problem. And so that if you don't have a problem with that, that's probably a conditional add.
If I could show you a rendering of what we have for it, the plan for it, because we have to actually have forklift access to bring in material.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see, the overhead door is item 107 on there. I have a pointer on here. Let me see. It's roughly here. Oops, right here. This is the overhead door.
Okay.
It is approximately 60 feet back. And the overhead door, the idea is this would roll up, it would be extra tall, so we could have forklift access to remove material. And this is, it's going to be very convenient for us because we would be loading in, most of the time, this would be kegs of beer or product directly in the cooler from our other facility, or bringing in raw materials. Mm-hmm. So it'll be back from the street far enough. The plan that we have is to have the garbage receptacles would be here, approximately 83 feet back from Holly Street, and that would include, your cardboard recycling. It would probably be a 4 cubic yard trash, and then there would be a separate man door back here. Now, part of this is just ease of use, but it'll also have panic hardware in the back here for the event that somebody was in here and there was a fire alarm that would go off. Then they would have a path of egress. But yes, so to answer your question, this is the plan, is to have it right here. And structurally, this is where an existing window is. So it makes sense. This is a concrete block building. It's very tricky to just willy-nilly be like, hey, let's just put an opening there. Boy, you don't really want that. This is unreinforced also. Okay. So we're trying to put it right here would be the ideal spot.
Okay, that's fine. I just want to make sure it gets in there.
Yeah.
We're not parking out in the street and going through the front doors or through our other places or whatever.
Trying to work smarter here.
Kind of, yeah, keep it in the alley. Now, you said that these food carts are going to be privately owned. And the only reason I ask about that is when I saw this, I just got back from a trip in Florida, and a guy had something similar to this, but the owner of the facility owned all the carts, so he was renting them out. And when I saw that this didn't look to me like those carts could get out of there, I thought, oh, okay, so he's doing the same thing, but you're doing the crane thing, so that works.
No, I don't like to have a captive tenant.
Yeah, I actually talked to him, and it was working for him. But anyway, I like this plan better. As far as the glazing is concerned, I'll date myself just a little bit. When we implemented this whole glazing thing for downtown, we were running into buildings like the library that were just these concrete wall things that we thought were really ugly, and we didn't want that to happen again. And so that was one of the reasons why we did this, was because we didn't want to perpetuate that and other buildings downtown. A lot cheaper just to put up a blank wall, but they're really ugly for your downtown. So that's why we did this. I think this meets the essence of what we were trying to do many, many years ago, was to have creativity, have it look nice. It wasn't that we absolutely thought we had to have glass windows. It was just we didn't want to have just blank walls. So this, as far as I'm concerned, meets that. Now, you just made a comment that you're going to have beer delivered here. Do you actually brew it here?
No. Well, it will, so technically from an OLCC standpoint, this will be a brewery public house license, because whenever you take a raw material and then you're converting it into a packaged product, that's when the licensing would occur for TTB federally and then locally here for OLCC. So we will be doing packaging. It will be blending and from our barrel-aged products, so beer that's sitting in barrels, and we're talking about, it could be spirit barrels that might have had bourbon in them at one time, or predominantly what it is from the winery industry, Pinot Noir, et cetera, that would be in these wine barrels. So it'll be packaged, so that's the brewery public house license, but it won't have the traditional aspects of a brewery that you would be familiar with that we have in Oregon City. We won't have a brew house. We won't have a boiler. But we will have full glycol setup that will be to chill all of the vessels that we have. So it'll look a lot like a brewery setup, but there won't be a bunch of, you're not going to see a bunch of steam coming off like you do in Oregon City all the time.
Right, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
You're not actually cooking it there.
Right.
Okay, because we don't really want that right downtown if we can help it.
It smells pretty nice, but that's just my
So the only other comment that I would make in this is that actually, I'll save that for later. So I'm done. Thank you.
Very well.
Thank you.
Commissioner Hutchinson.
If you were going to be mashing and brewing on site, I would require that you had a certain number of cats around to deal with vermin issues that come with I'm friends with the Nidkazi guys down there, and they have to work really hard to get the grain off site. And so, although they don't have vermin problems there.
Yes.
And so, yeah, very nice. I have to say, I really appreciate everything that you've done to maintain the transparency. I think that you've really done a great job living up to the spirit of the regulations. And I look forward to your future success.
Thank you, sir.
Commissioner Ellison.
Just that it was extremely thorough, and I appreciate the layout and all the presentations, and I'm really excited to have this be a part of downtown. That's it. No questions.
Appreciate that.
Before we move on, can I ask my questions? Thanks. I had a question. Flat roofs, how is that getting drained?
Yeah, it's not exactly flat. It does have a slope. So the brew pub portion that is shown to the right there with the new roof, that has a slope on it that was existing when the parallel cross trusses were put in there in 1975. Those are sloping trusses, and they slope to the corner. And then they go to scuppers that go down to the city sewer for storm management. The second roof that is already existing that won't be removed will it doesn't need to be insulated, obviously, because it's going to be outside. That'll be re-roofed, and then the same collection point, so roughly my pointer is right here. There's a downspout right here that's already existing that goes into the storm sewer.
Okay.
But we will slope it because it's not very good, so we'll likely put in, it looks like insulation, but it's not, just to achieve a little bit more dramatic slope to get the pooling correct.
Cool. The other thing I was curious about, fire sprinklers, are they in the eating area, the overhead eating area as well, or just in the interior of the building?
That's correct. It would be on the exterior piece also, and part of that is predicated because of the assembly use. Yeah.
All right, and then my big thing that I'm really pushing for in everything in Canby, we have ADA access on the corner of the sidewalk that's going to be redone. Will a wheelchair be able to get into the entrance at the front of the food carts? And will they be able to get into the bathroom?
Absolutely. So all of these bathrooms will be ADA bathrooms, all 4 of them. And they will, this is a 6 feet 7 inches wide paved surface.
Okay.
So it's exactly on grade. The other thing to consider here is everything will be panicked hardware with this ADA accessible in the event of emergency to get out. Sometimes that's left behind in a lot of these projects.
Cool. And then same thing with the door openings between the outdoor area and the indoor area. Like if you're in the covered area and then there's the 2 entrances that go into the brew pub, are those also the same width? So
They
somebody
will
could
be-
get through those.
They're not as wide, and part of that is the thought that there will be multiple people passing through, because it's a real pinch point. These will be, I believe what we have in the door scheme is that they're like 40 inches wide. They're extra wide. So yes, there would be no problem with accessibility, and it's all on the same grade.
Cool. Thank you very much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else before we move on? Okay. At this point, we would like to open the discussion up for any proponents. You have 3 minutes. Do we have any proponents of the project? Not seeing any on the interwebs, not seeing any in the crowd. Do we have any opponents? Nothing on the internet and nothing in the crowd. Very well. No rebuttal then. So at this point, we will close the public hearing and open deliberations amongst the Planning Commission. Thoughts, starting at this end. Commissioner Ellison.
Feeling great about it. No issue.
Okay. Commissioner Hutchinson.
Seems great to me.
Good.
Commissioner Llewellyn.
It looks great to me. Great job.
Commissioner Jarosh.
It's great use of that ugly building.
Right? And Commissioner Driscoll.
Yeah, I'm interested to see the cranes bringing the first pods in.
It's awesome. Okay, then I think we need to entertain a motion for, let's see, let me grab my project here. For DR 23-05 and VAR 23-02, referencing the Canby Beer Library Modified Project.
I move we accept DR 2305 and VAR 2302 as stated.
I
I
second.
second.
Okay, we have a second. One quick discussion item amongst, or for Mr. Ewert.
Mr. Mickelson, would we be able to add to your motion the adding of that loading door in the back there to make sure that that gets in there? For the alleyway?
I thought it was in the plans already.
No, it's not.
I'm not sure it's necessary, but I'll approve it.
Okay.
And we have a second also.
I second.
Okay, so we will take a roll call vote, starting with Commissioner Driscoll.
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Jarosh?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Ewert?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so we have a approval by a vote of 7-0 to approve the Canby Beer Library modified project DR 23-05 and VAR 23-02 as written with the addition of the roll-up door. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We are excited to have you. Okay, moving on to items of interest, reports from planning staff.
Yes, Commissioner Ellison, just a few items to bring you up to speed. Up and coming items that you may be interested in listening in on. November 1st, we're going to have a city council work session on essentially the comprehensive plan, transportation system plan, urban growth boundary. It's kind of the macro elements of that, but it's to bring the council up to speed on timelines, all the moving pieces of this that are in play here. That will lead to another meeting with property owners that are in the potential urban growth boundary expansion area. So there's a postcard going out tomorrow to those individual property owners in the undesignated areas within 1 mile of the current urban growth boundary. Rural reserve were not noticed because they are not eligible to be brought into the city. The postcard also has a map on it as well, which shows the areas of the city. It's a fairly large area. It's more than the city actually needs, but it's a requirement by state law that we do 1 mile. We do know what the acreage is based on the industrial side of things, on the need for 20 years and the expansion. You all have been through that economic opportunity analysis. There's also a housing needs analysis that is in draft, and we've talked about that. That has not been final, but we have acreage for both those. And then leading to the next round, which we want to highly encourage you all to participate in, is a November 14th Community Summit, 6 p.m. at the police station, Canby Police Station. That will be with puzzle pieces to place them for the urban growth boundary expansion, as well as the properties within the city and the current urban growth boundary, to identify where the community would like those residential, medium, low density, more high density residential, employment, commercial, parks in particular, sports kind of facilities, those kinds of things that people are interested in. Where should those be placed as part of that process? So November 14th, 6 p.m. The November 1st City Council work session is at 6 p.m. And the property owner, a notice that went out, and that's really more specifically for property owners, but that's at 6 p.m. and that'll be at the city council chambers as well. So lots going on those fronts. That's probably enough for now. There's other pieces that are moving forward. We will be coming back, well, maybe just a few other things. November 13th, we'll have a housing needs analysis work session with our consultants. That will be, again, addressing questions that have come up previously on the housing needs analysis. And then on November 27th, there will be efficiency measures, housing efficiency measures on that will come back, which is the cottage developments, planning unit developments, and residential being allowed more liberally within commercial areas, and specific on the south side of Highway 99. Those three will come back on November 27th. So kind of a busy month for November, heading into November. And then that'll take us through the next year. And the community summit following that November 14th community summit will be moving into scenario planning, which will be that next step. So next year is going to be, we're going to go right back into it. And I don't have dates yet, but we're hoping to have a large amount of this, kind of buttoned up by June. I mean, the adoption of the comp plan for the city limits and the urban growth boundary are anticipated by December 2024 for the current city limits and the current urban growth boundary. And then the urban growth boundary process would start, and that would probably take a year. The expansion would take about a year to go through the city, the county, and DLCD processes. And then that would hopefully be the finish of that. And then if people wanted to take advantage of those areas being part of the city, they could apply for annexations at that point. So that's all what's out there. So it's quite a bit.
Okay.
Open house, it's actually going to be, the community summit is at the police station, Canby Police Station.
The 1 mile radius of notification for the UGB, is the 1 mile radius for notification, or is the 1 mile a minimum of expansion for the UGB?
It's the notice. It's just purely the notice. So the state law basically says you need to notify property owners 1 mile outside of the current UGB. It's a huge amount of area. So if, and this is part of that discussion, which, again, it's kind of an awkward conversation because we're notifying people that probably have very little chance, if any, of ever coming in to the city during this round. 20 years beyond this plan, once we've gone through the 20-year plan and the next 20-year plan, you might be talking about some of those properties. But my general rule of thumb, if you're not abutting or adjacent to a UGB or a city limits, it's going to be probably harder to really, we don't have the acreage need really essentially to do that. And we have to look first to those areas that are adjacent and abutting. There's other criteria as well, but if you're way, you're half a mile from the city limits, probably going to be difficult for that to ever happen during this round, but the state law requires the notification.
Yeah, that was kind of what I was wondering, like how much do we actually need, or based on what we've already seen, versus what the notification.
But it's one of those, peculiar things of the Oregon system which probably will get a lot of interest from people. So that's going to be a lively discussion.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, assuming.
That was it, yeah.
That covered
Yep,
everything.
yep. Correct.
Okay, so moving into items of interest or guidance from Planning Commission. Does anyone on this body have anything for the group that we need to discuss? Commissioner Jarosh?
Yeah, I have one quick thing, and I've talked about this before, so maybe it's, I don't know, beating a dead horse, but the traffic studies that we're receiving seem really generic and almost boilerplate. And tonight particularly, because we have the data, like with the facility that we were talking about, and we know how many trucks go in and out of there now and how many employees. We know how many fire vehicles we have and how many buses we have and how many police vehicles, and yet none of that shows up in the report says, well, we think it's 50%. I'm just going to go on record and say, I don't think that's good enough when the facts are there and the city has them and they can pass that on to the consulting firm. I think it would be better served. That's all I have.
Sure. So noted.
Thank you, Judy. Commissioner Ewert?
I have two things. Walnut Street,
Yes.
where we at?
Brian may have updates that I don't have, but here's what I'm going to say on that is that it's still in the ODOT process. It's another point where I will ask that question. We are going through a right-of-way process, and then it was a slightly more expedited process was the idea that, and so we resubmitted under, and I'm forgetting the terminology of what that was, but that has been in several months. So I'm talking to our consultants, traffic consultants tomorrow who are helping out with the city engineer on that. So I will make a point to ask where that's at.
Okay, and the other thing, in the process of approving things like we approved tonight with the beer library downtown, I'd really, really, really like to see the city council encouraged to figure out some more downtown parking. We're struggling downtown. I know that the parking along the railroad tracks was supposed to be the end all for our parking downtown, but it's not. So I'd just like to pass that on. As much as we'd like to have things like the beer library go in, we need, he made the comment that they're going to have 30 employees there. Well, that chews up a huge amount of parking downtown, just for employees. We haven't put any customers in there yet, so.
And I think there's a larger discussion on that. I mean, you want that vitality for downtown, and I understand people want parking, and, I get that. And so I think there is a conversation probably more broadly about that happening. Having some parking challenges is not necessarily a bad thing for business and a community as well. So there's a dynamic there. And I know that's a kind of a delicate topic in Canby about parking.
Yeah, well, we've got this, the beer library going in now. We've got the new Italian restaurant, and
Yeah.
I think there's a brewery connected to that too. I don't know what we're going to turn into here, but hopefully we can all stay sober long enough to enjoy it. So we need to, I think the city council really, I would really encourage them to address that, because it's, we start filling this stuff up and, people can't park. They're not going to visit the businesses.
And even short term, if we just reach out to Public Works and ask for more signage to direct people to this parking lot, I mean, it wasn't until I had a conversation with someone about like, hey, we could really use more parking downtown. I think I was talking to you actually, Don, and you're like, oh, there's this huge parking lot right down there. It's like 2 blocks away. And honestly, it had never crossed my mind. And I feel like a lot of people, especially people visiting Canby, might not really be thinking that. And if we just had more strategic signage downtown that said, extra parking this way and pointed people down, it could help.
I love that comment. And like at the car show, because we were here for the city doing the comp plan update, we had a booth, and I noticed that people weren't they weren't in droves down there. They were everywhere else in the city. But I mean, I think the signage could be a good thing. Yeah.
Okay. Commissioner Jarosz, did you waive or no? Nope.
No.
Okay. If there isn't anything else, I think we can entertain a motion to adjourn. Do we have a motion?
I move that we adjourn the meeting.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
we are adjourned. Thank you, Canby.